Good morning. Exodus chapter 18. Sunday night, I was asked if I would mention to you the score of the Cowboys game. Delight Butts begged me to promise that I would do so, and I'm a man of my word. They lost by 3 points. There you go, Delight. Kept my word to you. If you had won, perhaps. Exodus chapter 18. We're really going to be looking at verses 13 and on. If you want to read the part up to that, Moses gets his family back. Jethro shows up. That's his father-in-law, brings his wife and kids. Pow, there you go. A little bit more to it, but that's the nuts and bolts. Exodus chapter 18, starting at verse 13. I was just looking up a passage. It came to me as I was sitting there on the pew. That's why I grabbed my phone. I wasn't texting someone else. All the people I know, with the exception of my family, are here. It doesn't do any good to text you. The span of man is like the grass of the field. It grows up, it blooms, it withers and goes away. And a lot of times in our lives, we focus in on the all-importantness of what we are. One of my favorite things to go to, I know I've mentioned this, there's a thing on Facebook, on the web called demotivation. I like the demotivation. You've all seen the motivation signs that like go, achieve, and it has that beautiful picture of, rocks and trees and things like that. You seen those? This is demotivation, where the whole point is to demotivate you. And so it has a picture of a ship sinking, and it says, perhaps the reason why you exist is to be a warning for others. It shows a picture of a giant avalanche coming and says, no single snowflake believes it's responsible for the avalanche. There's one that I really like, and it's a picture of a bunch of gears. And it says, just because you're important, or so just because you're necessary. Just because you're necessary doesn't mean that you're important. And a lot of times when we come into ministry and we come into our lives and we come into the things in which we do, we develop a sense of this is me. And we begin to define our relationship with our families, with who we are, and define our relationship within the church as what we do. And we then become the all-important self. And it's not out of negative means. It's not, well, I'm going to be the end-all, be-all in this session. It's done with very noble intentions. But what happens is we become the sole person doing something. And that is what Jethro is going to advise to Moses today, and the importance of shared burdens. Matter of fact, we just talked about that just in the announcements. Remember George W. Bush? Huh? How many of y'all want to be a kid wrangler? I can tell you can tell by my coaching style, kindergartners is not where it's at. But there was the need there, and so now you hear me yell, stay with your man! Stay with your man! I swear I'm going to have a coronary one day just yelling, stay. What was the last words he said? Stay with your man. But it's necessary. Let's look at verse 13. The next day, Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning until evening. And Moses' father-in-law saw what he was doing for the people, and he said, what is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone and all the people stand around you? By the way, that'd be kind of cool, right? My sermons could go on forever. I could sit, you could stand. No, not so much, right? And all the people stand around you from morning until evening. So from the time Mr. Sun raises its head, and from the time, and they didn't have daylight savings time either, folks, so, And Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of God. See how noble this sounds. Moses, why do all the people come and you sit and they come to you and they're here all day? You got to understand, Moses' job is not simply to proclaim judgments on or give people the hearing from the word. He also has this logistical nightmare called 12 buelling tribes of over 1 million plus some people that he has to find water for, or they go, "You've led us into the desert just to kill us without water. There's no food. All we have are these quail and this bread, and we only have to grow it. It just shows up." The water's too bitter. The water's too hot. I mean, it's almost like Moses meets the 3 little bears and Goldilocks. This porridge is too hot. This porridge is too cold. This porridge was just right. He's got that kind of stuff to mess with. And yet here he is, trying to do all of these things. What is going to happen to Moses? Those of you who feel like you are in that position where you are the end-all, be-all, not because that's what you want, but that's because you feel that's where you're thrusted, what does that make you feel like? I know that some of you begin to eventually dread the coming Sunday or the coming Wednesday. It quits being a ministry, and now it becomes a labor. There's several reasons why that happens. We'll look at them here in a minute. You and the people, Moses followed and said to him, "What are you doing is not good. You and the people will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You will not be able to do it alone." The task, Moses, that you are doing is not a one-man show. When I was in basic training, I had 1,700 soldiers attached to me every 10 weeks. And I told them, if any one of you, I said, I have to triage my level of care to you. Prioritize. Which means if all 1,700 of you had an owie, by the time you got done with basic training, I might actually get to the last kid. So this is my way of handling things. Someone dead, dying, or going to the hospital, bleeding out of both eyes, I'll get up in the middle of the night, I'll put my uniform on, I'll come see you. Your dead cat, your cat Fluffy, who you've loved since a kid, has died. I will see you when I get to you. Because it's a cat. And I hate cats. Seriously. Dogs I love. Cats a food ration. What you're doing isn't good. What you're doing is going to cook you, Moses. Why? Well, Moses is the guy who God is talking to. This is a natural assumption for Moses to have. God, I'm going to talk to you, Moses, and you're going to talk to Aaron, and you're going to lead the people. So it's a very monochromatic level of leadership. God, Moses, Aaron. Right on down. But notice what happens. Notice the response. Moses believes that he needs to do it because he's receiving what from whom? Direct revelation from God. And therefore, he should be telling the people directly. No, Moses. One of the reasons why we get caught up in this is we believe that we are the only one that can do it. If I don't, and I've heard this in churches, I've heard this in the army, I've heard this in people's personal lives, I hear this at my house. If I don't do it, nobody else is going to clean up after anybody. To which I still sit in the chair and just click the channel. It's true. If I don't do it, nobody else will. And that is a very noble understanding. But what happens is people like that typically begin to absorb more and more of those things and more of those things into their life until they either begin to define themselves by those things or until they begin to hate those things. And either one of them are not good. Well, the work of Christ is important. You are absolutely right. The work of Christ is very important. One of the things I told the young adults when we did children's church is that the church will pay for it. Yes, but I'm not paying for workers to be in your children's church. If your kids go in, guess what you're going to do? You're going to teach. So if you haven't been, you don't want to be on the pastor's naughty list. Checking it twice, going to find out who's been in children's church or not. No, I'm just kidding. But what happens is we begin to define ourselves and we begin to suck that in. And here's the crazy thing about that. You know what it is? Other people will let you. I am happy and content to sit with my feet propped up watching TV. And I'll let her do it. And she'll get, and then I'll get up and I'll do stuff for her because, happy wife, happy life. But people are content to let you do it. Why? Because then they don't have to. And one of the great problems within the churches is there are a lot of folks that are content to let 20% of the people do 80% of the burden. And this is an interesting number. It's an amazing statistic. It's almost like when your parking lot, and this is a statistic that's been proven over, when your parking lot hits 80% of capacity, you can't expect to grow anymore. Why? There's something weird about people. When it hits that size, we just, the parking lot's full and go around. When a classroom hits 80% of capacity, people go, that classroom is kind of full. This is why a lot of programs break on the 80-20 rule. And then also flips on the other side. 80% of the people are more than content with 20% of the people doing the work. 80% of the people are more than content with 20% of the people paying bills. And it's a great gig for the 20%, for the 80%. It's not for the 20%. And what happens is we look at the situation and go, well, it's their job to do it. The Lord's work is not a single point of person work. The Lord's work requires every hand, to be attached to the plow, to work. Well, I'm older. Moses is 81. He doesn't retire. That's an American concept. That is not a biblical concept. The understanding of, I've reached retirement age, is an American phenomenon all day long. It has nothing to do from the text. Are you a believer? Yes. Do you believe that the next generation is important? Yes. Then put your hand to the plow and get after it. Plain and simple. The work of the church is not a single point thing. Many hands make light work and are helpful to those who are drowning in the work. How many of you could walk past a lake seeing a person drowned, but quickly walk through the church and allow other people to drown under the burden of the work that must be done? How does Jethro solve this? Well, we'll look at that here in a minute. When you try to do everything, and this comes to the control freak side, because there's some folks that they love to do, they try to do it all. And ladies, more importantly to you, your culture has lied to you. That you can have a 40, 60-hour work week job and be Sally Homemaker at the house and do it all in the time you have. Ladies, you'll cook yourselves. It is a lie that your culture has told you. Something will slide off the plate. Invariably, something has to. The control freak thrives on this because they can believe they can do it all. And here's the thing. Eventually you begin to see things slip and things not quite get done the way it should be. I love watching multitaskers. And you sit there and you go, well, did you get that? Why didn't that get done? Why didn't they get that? Well, I'm the one doing all the work. Yeah, I know, but that didn't answer the question. Why didn't it get done? I'll tell you why it didn't get done. You got too much on your plate. And by default, certain things had to slide off the plate. And the reason why that has to happen is because, well, one person's doing the work and some people aren't. Have you ever noticed the more you try to hold on to something, the harder it is to hold on to it? Have you ever tried to grab a hold of Jell-O? Do that one day. I don't think Jell-O is a popular dessert anymore. I thought that was the hit when I was a boy. That was a dessert. Grab a whole handful of Jell-O and see what's left. How many of y'all have ever seen a watermelon wrestle? How many of y'all even know what a watermelon wrestle is? I will tell you. This is great with youth because it's hilarious with youth. I used to do this to torment my youth. You take one of the long watermelons and you cover it with a whole jar of Vaseline. But wait, there's more. You then slide it into a swimming pool in the deep end. Since a watermelon is primarily water, the watermelon sits about that much above the surface. And you watch these big, huge, strong, honking boys try to grab that thing, and the more they grab a hold of the watermelon, and it requires about 3 people, one on each side and one to keep it in the middle. And then you can finally, and it's almost impossible to let the watermelon out, but covered with Vaseline, it is really impossible to let that watermelon out. And you'll watch people try to drown each other trying to get that watermelon out of and the watermelon will almost drown because the kid trying to lift it up and the watermelon's just shoving them under the water. And you see the kid with this weird look in his face. When we try to do everything, it's like we're trying to wrestle a watermelon. And the harder we grip that watermelon, it only comes out as a team effort. It only will come out as a team effort. You have to have more than one person. I know. I have been on both sides of the watermelon. What you're doing isn't right. Well, how do you solve this dilemma? How do you solve this dilemma? Okay, you've pronounced the problem. How do you solve it? Notice what it says here. Notice what Jethro says. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God, and you shall warn them about the structures. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. And make it known to them in the way in which they must walk. But moreover, look for able-bodied men or able men from all the people. Men who fear God, who are trustworthy, and hate a bribe. That actually should define all of us. I know sometimes that doesn't define everybody within a church, but that should define all of us. But the first criteria that Jethro gives to Moses is look for able men. And one of the ways to translate that is able-bodied men. Another way to translate that is spiritually able men. So it has the connotation of both being physically up to a demanding challenge, but more importantly, spiritually up for a demanding challenge. You cannot be a hack at theology and be selected for this task. Look for men who are spiritually mature and physically able to do that. That should define a good chunk of us here, because if we've been in the church for a long period of time, we should be very spiritual people. Right? Or are we just pew sitters? Men who fear God. Men who have a reverent understanding of who God is. And also, if you look in the Old Testament, when they feared God, when God showed up, they recognized that God could take them out. Why is that important? Because if you believe your actions result in your death from a holy God, you are less apt to do corrupt actions. You are less apt to be a dissenter. You are less apt to be a stirrer of the pot. It's like when we talked about complaining. If the second person of the triune God showed up right here, how many people would have complaints they would really utter to the Lord? Men who are able, who fear the Lord with such a reverence that they understand that their very acts of things which they do, good and bad, affect their walk with Him. That revere His holy standard. Must be trustworthy. Can't be liars. Can't be gossips. Well, a little gossip's okay, isn't that, Brother Ashley? If I go over the speed limit by 1 mile or 20 miles, does it really matter. What am I called? A lawbreaker. A trustworthy person. One who does not lie. One who also is not partakers of pot stirring. One who is not partakers of dissension. One who cannot be influenced. And you'll see this also come up in the next one. A man who hates a bribe. In churches today, we don't have people bribing other people. Go, hey, tonight's the business meeting. Tonight's the business meeting. Vote no on Prop A. You didn't see nothing. Here, just something for your family. We don't have that. But what we do have are alliances within friendship. And we allow sometimes our friendships with one another to impede our ability to do what is right. A trustworthy and bribe-free man says, I don't care about the friendship over doing what is right for a holy God. That's a scary thing. That's a scary concept. I understand I have friends, but I must do the right thing. Folks, I have lost a lot of good friends for doing the right thing. Actually, I didn't lose any friends for doing the right thing because were they really my friend? A friend will recognize your conviction and stand with you regardless of the end result. An acquaintance will abandon you. We put the word acquaintance in for friend, when in reality, they are acquaintances. They do not take bribes. They are trustworthy men. They are spiritually able men. They are capable of doing these things. You go, great! So what? I'm glad you asked that question. This passage was tossed around a bunch during this election season. I got to bring back my sippy cup. This screwing this cap off is killing me. This was tossed around the election season. People use this as justification for how we should be doing our electoral system. And the fact of the matter is, while you can pull principles from this for how we should elect people, this was not a blueprint for how we should elect people in a pagan system of government. This is for the people of Israel. Should they be honorable men? Absolutely. Should they be men who distressed a bribe? Absolutely. But to use this and say, well, this is how God wants all governments to be. Notice that Jethro doesn't say, and when I leave here, I plan to go tell Pharaoh to do the same thing. One of the best ways to understand this passage is, how does the church understand it? Glad you asked that question. It shows you're paying attention. Acts chapter 6. Acts chapter 6. You cannot understand the roles for Acts chapter 6 without going back to Exodus chapter 18. You just can't do it. The church is going to use Exodus 18, and you'll almost see the verbatim of the terminology. Moses, you will go before the Lord. You will tell the people what the Lord has said. Then you will choose men who are of these qualities. Look at what happens in Acts chapter 6. Let's go. Now, in these days, the disciples were increasing in number, and a complaint amongst the Hellenists arose. Against the Hebrews because the widows were being neglected in the daily distribution. And the 12 summoned the full number of the disciples. It is not right. Same kind of terminology you find in Exodus 18, right? What is being done is not right. It is not right that we should give up preaching and teaching to serve tables. Moses, you will speak for God as God has directed. You will bring the message to the people and instruct them of the laws and statutes. It is not right that we give up that same task to serve tables. Therefore, choose from among you men of good repute. Trustworthy men. You go back to Exodus 18. Trustworthy men. Men who hate a bribe. Full of the Spirit and wisdom, able-bodied men, who we will appoint for this duty. But we will devote ourselves to prayer and the word of the ministry. Notice how that is pulled forward in the New Testament. It is designed for how the church governs itself, how the church does its business. You have the elders, and their job is prayer and preaching and teaching. And the deacons, whose job is serving. You have Moses. His job is to speak for God to the people, and these lesser judges to do things for the people. It is service role initiated in both examples. It is not political-based formula for how you should run a government. Can you use it as an analogy? Can you pull it for it? Sure. But to blanket apply it is to misuse the text. So you may be thinking, well, this is great. So this is how deacons should be going. Well, yeah, that's great. But it's not simply limited to deacons. Exodus 18. I think you can apply it totally across the board to Christian ministries. One of the things that happens in Christian ministries is, especially when a person has served in a position for a long period of time, we develop what is known as a fiefdom. Now, fiefdoms were the essential part of the feudalistic system, in which you had several little fiefdoms that made a whole feudal society. And as long as nobody did anything wrong in this fiefdom, it was able to self and autonomously rule itself. The problem is that model doesn't fit with the church. The church is not a bunch of separate little fiefdoms that coalesce under the banner of the church. And you'll hear this terminology in fiefdoms. This is my ministry. No, it's not. This is God's ministry. And He has enabled you to do it. When we begin to say things are mine, we are now defining ourselves by what we are doing, and we are telling people subtly in other terms to keep your hands off. That's a fiefdom. That is not the church. All ministries are God's ministries. They're not yours. He enables you to do them. He equips you to do them, but they are not yours. And here's a great thing about God and His enabling gift. He can shift your enabling to do things other than what you're currently doing. And so by defining yourself by that, you end up then limiting yourself to a role. Typically, when you have that statement made, you push away those who would like to be involved in your ministry. Oh, wait, no, it's not yours. Again, remember, it's God's ministry. One of the great retainers of people to the church is to have them involved. To not have people involved is to demand to have a church that will die. That's what you're saying. This is mine and no one can help me with it. That's what Moses said. And what's going to happen to Moses? He's going to work himself to death. Some men in ministry think that they're the only ones that can do it. I had this happen to me in Italy. Had two people, they were responsible for doing the meals, and they got very upset. And I said, well, I don't understand why you're upset. And they said, well, we're leaving. Folks, let me just tell you how my personality works. I don't negotiate from a zero sum. If you begin saying, I'm leaving or you change, that will fall on deaf ears with me. We come to the table putting everything on the table to negotiate, or I'm just going to go, okay, bye-bye. Because there has to be some room to negotiate, and if there is no room to negotiate, then there's not a negotiation. So they came and they said, well, we're leaving, and you'll never get anybody to do a Sunday night meal. Okay. That Sunday night, I went into my congregation and I said, I make the best chili in the world. Being a transplanted Texan who's been there for 20-something years, my chili is so superb that I'm willing to put my chili on the table to compete with every one of y'all's sorry excuses for chili. And I will bet that not only will my chili beat all of y'all's, y'all will be begging me for my secret herbs and spices. We were swimming in chili. And after that, 2 people volunteered. And they ran the meals. Only I can do it. No. God has equipped you to do it. There's a band, some of you may know them. There's a band called Trans-Siberian Orchestra. They do a lot of Christmas music. For some of you older folks, probably I would ease into it. You've got to think Eastern Orthodox heavy metal hair band meets Christmas music. Okay? They did a non-Christmas album called Beethoven's Last Night, and I really enjoy it. And they have a great line from one of their songs in which the devil has now come to Beethoven and has begun to enforce the contract that he had him sign. Beethoven's response is, I am too important. I can't go. The world will be robbed of my music. And this is the devil's response. Graveyards are filled with important men who believed they could not be spared. But they were in the end. The minute you were born, you were dying. Every breath you take is a precious gift from God. I have noticed from my own career within the Army. In August 2014, August 1st, was my last day in the Army. You know what happened on August 2nd? My replacement took over and the Army continued on. Regardless of how important I was or unimportant I was, the Army continued to transition on and did that through a cut of a whole mess of captains. Does that in spite of a whole mess of losses. You go back and you read the Civil War, you do not see the Army disband over a large amount of losses. What the Army simply does is go, okay, they are gone. I now must move forward. The idea in our head that somehow what we do is so important that we cannot be replaced, including in ministry within the church. Let me inform you that God can replace you with someone that looks exactly like you. And the church will truck on. Maybe not in the exact same way, but it will truck on. Why? Because man's days are like the flowers of the field. We spring up, we flower, we die. Another section of the text says, and the wind blows over it, and our place is remembered no more. When we begin to believe we are the all-important self about what we are doing, we seem to forget who the enabler of those gifts are, and then we begin to think that we are the ones that do it. We are the ones that make it happen. No, dear child of God. You are not. Christ, through you, does. But folks, one of the reasons why that happens, one of the reasons why people assume that, is because those things have been thrust upon them. Because 80% of the people like to do 100% of the sitting. 80% of the people are content with 20% of the people working themselves slavishly into the ground. Because after all, I'm busy. Let me just put this to bed. The I'm busy excuse carries no water with me. We are all busy. There, let the cat out of the bag. We are all busy. We all have things in our life that consume our time. We all have things that demand from us family, kids, church, work, people, friends, even those on Facebook. They all demand a sliver of your time. That is not an excuse. Well, I'm not trained. I'm not equipped. Great, I'm glad you're in the church. Now get trained and equipped. You do not have to be well trained or well equipped to listen to children say verses. You just have to be willing. Well, I don't like kids. I don't like cats, but we have one. Get over it. And that is one of the most expensive cats in the world, because I paid to ship that cat over to Italy and paid to bring it back. That's an expensive cat, I'll let you know. But I have 2 little girls that dearly love the cat. You will have little kids that will dearly love you when you say, listen to those verses. Get over it. Well, I'm retired. Really? Find that from the Bible, and I'll let you use that as an excuse. Moses is 81, people. 81. He will be with these people, well, they're going to spend 40 years there, wandering. He'll be 800, he'll be 80, well, 40, don't get me doing math, he's over 100. And he's still doing it. Retirement is not an excuse, though you may think it is. Let me be perfectly clear. There is no such thing as a ministry in a church that does not need volunteers. And there is no such thing as a ministry within a church that can't use volunteers. There are just those things that where we either exclude volunteers or volunteers have chosen to exclude themselves because they do not want to be involved. Because at the core of all of this is we have developed a church of consumerism. I come to church to get. Folks, that's sinful. You don't come to church to get. You come to give. You come this morning not to get worship, but to give worship to the one true God. You are not the audience. Let me burst your bubble. You are not the audience this morning. God is. You are here to worship Him actively. And part of that active worship is through service. Not simply being a pew potato. Do you know why we don't have revival in America today? Because we have a whole churches all across this great land that are filled with pew potatoes that do not take the gospel message outside their door and do not involve themselves in the gospel message inside the doors. And then we sit there and go, I don't know why, God, I don't know why. I'll tell you why. 20% of the people are doing 100% of the burden, while 80% of the people are doing 100% of the sitting. And that is unacceptable. It shouldn't be unacceptable because I say it's unacceptable. It is unacceptable because it's unacceptable for a holy God. Where are you today? Which percentile do you put yourself into today? Well, I give. Great. God appreciates you returning to Him a portion which He gave to you. Thank you. What else do you do? Right. Well, that's why we pay people. Yeah, no, that's not why you pay people. What part of the equation are you on? Are you 100% pew potato, or are you a 20% giving 100%? What percentage are you today? Because as the text both says here and in Acts, what the 20% doing is not good, because it will wear them out. And when they quit doing the work, churches fail. Do you want this church to have a legacy beyond the next 10 years? Beyond the next 20 years? Beyond the next 40 years? Beyond the next 60 years? Well, yes. Then put your hand to the plow and don't look back. We should be telling people we're full of workers, not please come help. What percentage are you today? Are you the 20% giving 100%, or are you the 80% sitting 100%? As the praise band comes to sing, I want you to ponder that thought. I want you to contemplate where you are on that scale. I want you to sit and list out all the excuses as to why you cannot. And then look for reasons as to why those are false excuses. Because they all are. If you're here today and you've been wanting to join the fellowship of this church, I would really appreciate if you would like to come forward. I'd love to sit and talk with you. Turn my mic off. It'd be a conversation between me and you about the fellowship of this church as the praise band leads us in singing.